Welcome everyone. Michael DeHaan, founder of Care to Grow, and I've got Tamika Smith with me this morning. How are you, Tamika?
Good, Michael. Thank you very much for having me today. I've got my new little mate Alfie with me. He's falling asleep on my shoulder, so hope you don't mind him crashing the party.
And when did you get the puppy? We were just talking about it before.
Yes, I picked up Alfie last night. He's only 8 weeks old, so he's got another big brother border collie running around here somewhere. But yeah, he's a new addition from the family. He's probably one of the very few people that things that can fly around the country right now. We just don't get many flying rights in Queensland, but he flew up last night. So there you go.
So I want to give a bit of a brief around Tamika and the sort of purpose of this interview. So Tamika is the founding director of TSR Property Solutions. Run that business for 3 years, and you're also the most influential woman in construction 2019. I'm really interested in finding out a bit more about that. A very sort of male dominated industry, so looking forward to that. You're the executive chair of the top 100 women in the construction industry, and I think with a purpose driven around social and affordable housing. So again, really interested in that. I wanted to share, so Tamika and I sort of got together or met about a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and what really connected me with Tamika is her passion around, I suppose, coming up with solutions. So in particular for women aged over 55, as an example, that find themselves homeless. And that's a real message, a real sort of resonation with me, because that's a part of that sort of financial freedom, that financial safety that I'm working with women as well. So again, there's a real alignment there, Tamika. So ever since you sort of shared that and what you're doing, I think it's amazing.
Thank you. And likewise, I think, giving women their financial stability to avoid the vulnerable situations that we're helping them in from a housing point of view is very in social housing.
Yeah. So this is a series, so I just want to share that. So it's a women's empowerment series, talking with leading women around Australia that are either using their voice and visibility in their community, in the industry, in business, and Tamika ticked all those boxes. So I'm really excited about, again, just asking you some questions, and it's more around the storytelling, connecting with younger women to sort of look at your journey and maybe go down a pathway there, that there's some learnings out of this that they can be more confident and to realise their best lives, so to speak. So
Sure.
We'll sort of jump into it, and I'll just ask you some questions, if that's all right. So what I'd like to know is just probably a little bit about yourself, Tamika. So away from business, in regard to your more personal side.
Sure. So I grew up in a small country town, just out of a small country town called Grafton in northern New South Wales, the country kid. So I grew up very quickly. I was raised with a very strong work ethic. My dad's works for Telstra. My mum is a nurse, and so are my 3 older sisters. So I was a little bit of a black sheep. But yeah, probably the ages of 13 and 14, I had some very significant learnings and decisions to make about the direction of my life. And I think I found myself in a situation at a young age where I had to accept accountability for the direction of my life that it was going in. And I had to accept that there was no one that was going to come and change that but myself. So from the age of 13 through some significant and very challenging encounters, I began to put a bit of a checklist together of what I wanted my life to look like. Wow. I think the direction I was going in, to be frank, it was either going to be, jail or dead. So I didn't have a lot of people around me that were going to change that. So I had to assume responsibility for that and accountability. If you look at the businesses that I've set up, Michael, they're all around accountability to be able to give people the tools to make better decisions in their life. So at the age of probably 14, 15, I ticked out everything that I wanted in my life. And, I used to have school friends that would go, how are you going to get those things? And I'd go, I don't know, but I know that I'm going to get them. So I began to read a lot of books. And in my mind, if I just followed the path of somebody else, then it was a very logical conclusion that I would end up in a similar, or at least a better situation than where I was.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say to me, Michael, that, God, how could you get into construction? It's so ruthless, it's so male dominated. And I think, my answer to that has always been, it was like I was in an island full of lions and I was going to die. But if I jumped in the ocean full of some sharks, I had a chance of living. And for a lot of people, that took them a while to get their head around. And for me, jumping in that ocean with just some sharks and a chance of living was an opportunity that I could actually see that, wow, this is a vehicle where I can get to those goals of where I want to go to. And I've always been very been an advocate for that with construction. For a lot of people, they say, it's tools and it's hammers and that's the answer. But to me and to many other little girls, that doesn't inspire them. Yeah. But it's a brilliant vehicle to get to where you want to go. Wow. And for me, that was uncapped potential. That was a better life than the one I had. And that meant putting my head down and finding the opportunities. And in an industry that isn't as regulated as what construction hasn't been to date, that meant that there were a lot of opportunities and a lot of loopholes for me to find my way in to get to where I wanted to go. So I began, one of the owners of Metricon put me on when I was about 19 because he could see, my work ethic. I think prior to that, I was probably, when I got out of Grafton, I was probably on $30,000 a year and doing 70 hours or something at the age of 18. And the owner of Metricon could see my work ethic, and he said, come and work for me. And at that point, I had 2 of the job offers in general real estate. And I remember being a bit scared going, this is construction, this is very different. But I jumped under his wing, ticked the boxes within Metricon, was the first female to be the #1 consultant. Then we started a division in projects, which I was a part of. Started doing our own projects, but I could grasp that they were a lot more versatile than just one building methodology. Yeah. So I then went out to work with more builders. And in working with more builders, within the first 12 months, we were doing federal funded projects, state funded projects, and I didn't have a website yet. But what we did do is we were able to pass the commercial acumen that we had learnt onto the mum and dads. And they were the ones that needed our help the most. They were the ones that didn't have the funds to employ a project manager or a development manager like the financially stable people could. But we were able to help them set up their projects to manage that accordingly. Yeah. So went through, TSR became successful very quickly in that respect, scaled the business. We then had a builder that went broke. Now, overnight, that was probably about a $400,000 exercise. Wow. And I think having me not having a husband or a family financially to support me, I did begin to go, well, why didn't I get into hairdressing? This is hard. Yeah. And standing at Supreme Court, understanding the game of law, understanding that even if you had everything documented, that didn't mean you would get the outcome you wanted. Even if you had every signature, even if you played the game that we were all taught to play, that didn't mean that you were going to get the outcome that was fair and that was reasonable. Yeah. And so going through that experience, I'd already started top 100, but my only commitment was to feature 100 women. So I was winning awards with TSR, and my only commitment was to say, hey, I'm not the only one. There are other women doing brilliant things here. Yeah. They're just afraid to put their heads up. Wow. Yeah. And I think in having this level of authenticity to the group, and there was then featured in Women in Construction, Amsterdam, London, Europe, and it just continued to scale. In that, circulating to grow to a community of near 13,500 people.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then simultaneously going through Supreme Court and having everyone say to me, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. I got sick of that. And I said, I don't like the way it is. And I think I've spent a lot of my career with people and my life with people saying, that's just the way it is. That's the way it is. And I didn't like the way it is. So I went to top 100. I basically converted it into a full business on its own. We launched an online platform which allowed women to have their own community all around the world, to connect, to apply for job opportunities, to upskill, So it's like a Facebook, LinkedIn, and a Seek all in one
Yeah.
for women in construction. We're shortly about to launch launch the Top 100 Training Academy, which is specialising in upskilling the sector. That will be both for women and men. But we were committed to making it better.
Yeah.
So when we started to understand just what was acceptable in our industry, the more we protested it and the more we went, this should not be acceptable. How is it acceptable for this to go on?
Yeah.
And as we hear so often in the construction sector, people just to start up in another entity, or for a deed of company arrangement to happen, and technically no one can get their insurance because, well, it didn't really go into liquidation. The sister company just lent it money and then took the assets out and left the debt behind.
Yeah.
And that's something that we hear so often in the construction sector. But going through that experience, sitting on the front line, I wasn't sheltered. I wasn't, doing a job back in the corner there. This was me. This was me showing up to Supreme Court with barristers, solicitors, and going, what's happening now? Oh, great, we won costs against us. That's great outcome, right? Yeah, sure. And everyone's going, woohoo, great outcome. And then you get a bill, and people are like, oh, but you have to get them to pay the costs. Well, okay, so how is that a great outcome? I don't understand. So I think in my naivety, Michael, in being on the front line and always being courageous, and I think like I can say about myself, to go, I'm going to show up and I'm going to figure it out. I found the loopholes. I also found the pit holes. And I was also committed to saying that I don't want anyone else to find those pit holes. And if that's part of my journey and my purpose, that I have to experience those things, I want to make sure no one else has to.
Wow.
And that if there's someone else that's going to follow me through those experiences, they'll have an easier path. Because in my mind and my heart, I couldn't justify those experiences for nothing. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah. That's a great share, Tamika, and I appreciate that. And I think what I got from it anyway is that you're not going to accept the status quo if it can be improved and if it's not fair.
Correct.
So, and again, I see so many people wanting to say something, wanting to stand up and not feeling comfortable, or just choosing to sort of let it go and not actually speak their truth. So
Correct.
I believe that's encouraged a lot of people to actually step up. So yeah, great story. Thank you.
I think, Michael, when bad things happen to you, particularly I find with women, we have a tendency to feel shame and to feel guilt and to carry that. And I think I did, it was like, oh, I feel shamed, I feel embarrassed, this person's just taken a lot from me, I feel guilty. And it wasn't until I had a moment of going, this is fear that's circulating in me now. Do I choose to live my life that way? No, I don't want to. But I've come from Grafton. I've come from nothing. If you want to try and take everything from me, I know that I've got my values and I know that I've got my integrity. And at that point, that's when I went, get out of the road. Like, even if you take everything from me, I'm familiar with the ground, so I'll get up. I don't know that you are. So I think at that point, that's when I built these businesses that I have on my integrity and on my values.
Yeah.
And anyone who works with us from a client point of view through to government relations, they know that about us. If you're not on the same level of integrity and values, we're creating a new age business. We don't care about the top dog winning just because that's the way it always has been.
Sure.
We're not interested. But something based on our values and our integrity, that's us.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And you touched on that sort of 100 women, top 100 women. So can we dig a bit deeper there to get probably a bit more of an understanding of, because it's around that sort of social and affordable housing as well. So.
Sure. So it's a TSR is based, just to give you an overview if I can, TSR Property Solutions is an end-to-end solution now that oversees development, construction and the exit strategy. So we oversee everything. Now, Top 100 Women is its own online community, which is expanding since its launch in February, since we actually launched that platform. That's continuing to expand. What I didn't really envisage is that through us doing all this work on helping women, did draw a lot of attention to the fact that if we could educate women, we could potentially prevent the statistic and the issues that we were addressing in TSR. So that meant that, okay, well, if we, we were with Power Housing Australia down at Parliament House in November, just gone, discussing some of these issues and discussing how we could prevent this long term. And it organically connected those two businesses. And I didn't understand at first how that was going to happen. Yeah. But they organically just synced. Okay, one's now educating, one's now connecting, and the other one's building the houses and building an affordable solution. And with some of the housing outcomes we're delivering, we've now been able to turn developments from a 4% to a 38% return on investment, just by collectively overseeing every touch point and being able to simultaneously reduce the margins.
Yeah, well, that's a great outcome.
Yeah, it is. It's good. That's really good, and it's necessary in our industry to be innovative in the social housing space. A lot of people will wait for government, something else to come, but we're tired of waiting. And so our connection in TSR was building the bridge between commercial acumen and the community housing sector that really needed our help. Yeah. Top 100 Women is becoming the vehicle to educate the girls and I guess the boys to make a better industry, but to try and ensure that, similar to what you're doing, people are financially equipped and educated that they can upskill throughout pregnancy. They can upskill and access those opportunities throughout having children. And, as we know, the women over 55 who are on that social housing wait list, they might have had jobs prior to having children. But then throughout that period of having children, they've been divorced, husbands passed away, they were then left going, I'm 55, don't have any skills, I haven't retained any skills over that certain period of time. Yeah. So part of what we're doing is making that accessible, whether it's through CPD points, part of the Top 100 Training Academy, to be able to ensure that people can access opportunities as they pop up. But staying relevant is very important.
Yes, yeah.
In an industry that's completely changing. And if we can do that through an hour webinar once a month or twice a month, to ensure that these people are staying connected to their community, for one, and then upskilling too, we'll be able to create better outcomes, both in housing and in construction.
Yeah, and I picked up on that word, that connection piece. I think it's just so valuable. Yep, so that's great work. So I've got one last question for you.
Sure.
So what would you tell a young woman that's, as I said, lived in Grafton, coming into the big bad business world? What tip would you give a young woman in that sort of space in regard to what you've learned and looking at maybe the mindset of how they might think about their next steps?
Look, I'd say be teachable, but know your boundaries and be okay with that. But be teachable. I think a lot of the things that I've experienced that have been painful, when I boil it down, I've probably been down to, why did I tolerate those things? Why did I put up with those things? And the more you grow and the more you learn, Michael, you realise a lot of that's down to your own self-worth, yeah. I think. So it's incredibly important for children who come from difficult circumstances to establish that self-worth themselves if they haven't got that around them. So I think authenticity is a big thing. A number of the things that I have presented to government, they've been really baffled, going, we've never seen anything like this. Wow. And that's because I didn't go the traditional route of thinking. So I do think it's important to encourage people to be themselves. We've got plenty of sheep in the world, but what people are employing now is creative thinking, emotional intelligence, not just knowing the basics and the schooling systems. So I'd say, be authentic, be persistent, be incredibly persistent. I was probably the biggest persistent pain in the ass that you knew. But it was like, and I say to people all the time, it was like I kept showing up to baseball practice. And I didn't know how to play baseball, but I kept showing up. And I'd show up on time. I'd work the longest hours, and, I'd show up the next day and the next day and the next day. And anything I could get my hands on to learn,
Yep.
I'd read the book, I'd study the tape. At one point, I was probably listening to 3.5 hours of self-development a day in the car because I'd drive an hour and a half to work.
Yeah.
So, and then I'd read half an hour before bed, half an hour, when I was waking up. So it was probably about 5 hours at one point all up that I was absorbing, just trying to get anything I could to learn and to be better.
Yeah.
What happened in me having that set of resilience and persistence is that people started to go, I respect her. What can I do to help you?
Yes.
Because when nobody else was at the office that late, when everybody else would leave home, I'd show up and I'd go, how do I figure this out? Can you help me? And I was never afraid to say those words. And because I did in a male-dominated industry, people went, we're not used to hearing that.
Yes.
And yes, we can. So I think often in male-dominated industries, the mistakes that a lot of people have done is that they've encouraged women to be men. However, in me being me, a female, a woman, vulnerable, feminine, it actually disarmed the traditional environments that we saw.
Yeah.
Because people were able then to reach out and go, yeah, how can we help you? So I've got a lot of uncle-like figures in the industry that will always look out for me, and I'm thankful for that because I showed up and I kept trying, and I think that won their respect in an industry where people would just go, well, I already know, and I think took a different approach to that.
Thank you for sharing. And again, something so important where I've interviewed women leaders and they almost took on the male role because they thought they had to, and show up as a male leader, and so they weren't authentic. And it was only when they were empowered and actually changed their style to their real them, that they actually changed people's lives and changed communities. It was at that point when they said enough's enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to be me because I've got a lot to offer.
Well, it's exhausting being anyone else, I think. And look, we've all done it. I think, when I went into construction, I was very much like that. I was like, get out of my road, point to prove. But after a while, it's like, this is exhausting. I just want to be me.
Yeah. So thank you, Tamika. It was an amazing interview. I knew it would be. As I said, I was looking forward to it, and you've certainly provided so much value to, one, the series, but also to young women who will listen to your story and get a lot out of it. So that's that personal development, and you're giving back, you're sharing in a personal development sense. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael, and well done on all the work that you're doing for women in finance. I think that's it's a very important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. We have a great day, and I again appreciate your time. It's so valuable. Thank you.
No worries, Michael. All the best.
See you, Tamika.
Bye.